Director Coit, I don't know that you've had any direct involvement in P3s of your own, but I think you may have had some experience with what the benefits of P3s are. So please, clear the room.
Am I good?
I think you are. Yeah, up is on, which seems counterintuitive, but nonetheless, up is on.
These days, up is down. Thank you, Chairman Coffey and members of the Special Commission on P3s. I appreciate the opportunity to come and talk to you about some of the ways that either DEM or some of the municipalities that we regulate employ P3s. So I want to start by simply reminding you all that DEM has a very broad scope. So I'm going to start with some traditional areas with infrastructure that I think is really the focus of your resolution. But then I want to add just a couple comments and some other ways we've used P3s in other areas that you might not have been thinking of. So first, I want to start with wastewater treatment facilities. And that is something that Mr. Chairman, you already mentioned, and Director Alviti already mentioned when it comes to Cranston, which was really the first major P3 in that area. But that has been, I think, a very successful area for Rhode Island to use P3s. And as you may know, we regulate at DEM the wastewater treatment facilities in Rhode Island under the Clean Water Act. And through our standards and requirements, the municipalities have to meet certain thresholds. These are large, complicated facilities to operate, and it's been with a customer base. It's been an area that has really made a lot of sense for municipalities to use these P3s. So there's 5 that I would say are traditional P3s since the late 1990s. And while there's been a variety of approaches, they've all had certain common elements. And that is that the community retains oversight. There's a well-defined payment stream, and obviously you've got a customer base there. Many of the agreements have some kind of upfront fee, whether that's a set host fee or some other kind of fee to the community. And then very importantly, agreement over the duration of the facility that allows for sewer fee increases and meeting performance standards. And most of those projects have had some kind of public financing through the Clean Water Finance, now Rhode Island Infrastructure Bank. So I think it's been an example where there's been a combination of private financing and then low interest loans through a public, quasi-public bank that gets state bond money and federal money and leverages it quite effectively. And I'll say at this point that I think there's a strong interest by Jeff Deal and the current Rhode Island Infrastructure Bank to look at innovative ways of financing large infrastructure projects, and that this P3 concept is something that they're familiar with and interested in expanding. So when it comes to wastewater treatment, you may have seen, I think you did, Mr. Chairman, the article about a study we have coming out about the vulnerability of our systems to climate change. Naturally, these systems are at a low point in the watershed, and they are vulnerable to flooding, and they're vulnerable to sea level rise. So we have a study that's been underway for almost 2 years now that I think is going to show some new areas of need. Almost all of our facilities have completed improvements and upgrades or are in the process, but we are going to see that we have, in order to protect these facilities from flooding, which happened in 2010, infamously, in West Warwick and Warwick. So I think there'll be some other large infrastructure projects around wastewater treatment facilities that may be places to look for these kind of P3 contracts. So that leads me to another area that is really on our minds at DEM, which is stormwater. And we have not traditionally used P3s in a context of collecting and treating and mitigating stormwater. However, the one place that's really well known for doing this to date in Prince George's County is actually a project being done by a Rhode Island company, which is Corvius, which is headquartered in East Greenwich. So I wanted to mention that not only do we believe that there's well over $100 million of need for stormwater mitigation projects in Rhode Island, and that they're critical for improving water quality and addressing flooding, but also that a P3 model could be a very good model for municipalities to use. There's many of the same characteristics with one big exception, which is a customer base that's going to be an assured payout mechanism over years. So in Maryland, they do have a state statute that allowed for imposition of a fee on impervious surfaces so that you could collect from folks who are contributing to a stormwater problem funds that could be used to addressing the problem. And so I wanted to mention that we do have authorizing statute in Rhode Island for that same kind of stormwater utility, and we have several systems that are looking at that. So I think if municipalities put that in place to address their municipal stormwater problems, you would have then that same kind of customer base that could provide a funding stream over a period of decades where a P3 model might suddenly make a lot of sense. So those are the two areas of infrastructure, and in each case, obviously, public benefit. We're reducing pollution, we're meeting federal and state Clean Water Act standards, and we're providing oversight of a public entity, but the expertise and skills of a private company that could do, in many of the cases, it is the design, build, operate, maintain model. So those are the major areas of infrastructure. One, which I think is our best model. The second, which I think is a real area of opportunity and need. And then I wanted to briefly mention a couple other areas that just might be of interest. They involve not private for-profit companies, but nonprofit entities. And I think it's an example where the state, and in particular DEM, has been innovative when we look at our shrinking resources and our public needs. So two examples I just wanted to throw out for you. One is the partnership that we have with Sale Newport at Fort Adams State Park. So this is an example where we own a magnificent park that has so much potential. Our park staff is very small. We have less than 40 FTEs, and our goals and our vision is very large. So in many areas where we don't have the staff to either construct, maintain a facility, or carry out programs, we've developed partnerships. These aren't the same kind of RFPs where everybody take a look and see who can come up with the best bid. They are more a very specific type of entity that exists for doing a specific function. So in this case, I wanted to highlight that with Sale Newport, DEM has an active partnership that they're a nonprofit organization. They have a board, and they raise a lot of money. They're in a position where they can host events like the Volvo Ocean Race that we are fortunate to have hosted and fortunate to have attracted back, that generates tens of millions of dollars and brings hundreds of thousands of people and brings invaluable PR to Rhode Island. So we have an entity like Sale Newport, a small nonprofit really, that can host that, but it can host it because we operate and maintain a facility that has a magnificent pier and sufficient electric outlets and the capacity to bring in all these people. And most recently, we did a project with them on a new $5 million mid-park facility. The state's investing less than 1/3 of the costs. Sale Newport's investing over 2/3. They are leasing the facility. It goes before our State Properties Commission to review the lease. They are providing public benefits over the period of the lease, restrooms, showers for rugby players and things like that, but they're also having private use to operate their programs. And I think it's just an interesting model to look at how the state can leverage a smaller staff and some facilities to have organizations and programs that benefit a large number of the public. And of course, Sale Newport teaches people to sail with a real focus on youth, disadvantaged communities where kids can learn how to exercise and get out in the water and benefit by the bay. So they have a really positive outdoor recreation mission. And then just quickly, another one I thought you might be interested in. The governor's very focused on food, the food sector, and DEM has a partnership with a nonprofit called the Rhode Island Food Policy Council. And in that case, we've been able to work together and put together a number of programs where we've attracted a lot of philanthropic dollars to help match public funds for small grant programs, to hire a position to develop a food strategy. That's actually 100% funded through philanthropic dollars, but they would only do it because there's a partnership with the state that's committed to looking at the ways that the public departments can promote food, for commerce, for food security, and for growth of our agriculture and fisheries. So that's another example where we're looking at how to extend and stretch what government can do with what I think is a P3, in that it's a public-private partnership, albeit with a nonprofit, to achieve a public benefit with a very set parameter for outcomes and ultimate oversight by the government agency. So in conclusion, I think in the areas that we're working, the rather flexible, to amplify what Director Alviti said, the rather flexible rules that we have here have allowed us through the purchasing process or through contracts or through some of the long-term leases to achieve results with P3s using the tools and the authorities we have now. And I'm thrilled that you're looking into this, because I think it's a real, as we see government not growing but the needs growing, I would just say that the clarity of the mutual purpose around which a P3 is created, with the clear public benefit and the performance standards or outcomes and the clear oversight, I think makes it something very fruitful to expand. So thank you.
Thank you. Questions?
Yes, Director. With regard to the stormwater management systems, we're under a consent decree, is that correct? I mean, correct?
So we, some municipalities are under the Clean Water Act, municipal systems have to meet certain standards. So the DOT is under a consent decree with the Department of Justice and the federal EPA, and they are required to meet certain stormwater. They're required to remedy certain transgressions from the past and to make sure that the roads that they are building, meet stormwater design standards. And that's a $110 million commitment over 10 years.
So there's no P3 mechanism on the horizon with a runoff fee or something else, how are they going to pay the $110 million?
So they have, under that consent agreement with the federal government, they made a commitment to request appropriations over a period of 10 years.
So it's subject to legislative appropriation every year.
It is.
Part of their capital program. I assume it's part of their capital program.
I'm not sure which part of the budget it's in, but it's a budget request. And that is so that's one discrete area where we have a consent agreement. We also have one with the city of Warwick and some other municipalities, and often where some of the most innovative stormwater arrangements have been made after there's a consent agreement or enforcement mechanism that really forces attention and action.
Okay. With regard to the Fort Adams, it looks like to me, what you described as a triple net outdoor convention center, pretty much. I mean, is Sale Newport getting an exclusive right for Fort Adams, or?
That's where I was trying to differentiate. I mean, we have a very specific need, and that is an entity that has been really a partner that has met that need and grown with us. So they don't have an exclusive right to use Fort Adams per se, but they do have an exclusive arrangement with us over a facility that we're building together.
Okay.
Over a period of years. It's a lease arrangement.
For both of your benefit, I recall, isn't there another nonprofit entity that provides some management services overall to activities within Fort Adams?
So Fort Adams is so first we just did a return on investment study with URI on our parks, and Fort Adams far and away provides, they were estimated conservatively to bring over $60 million of revenue to the state each year through the variety of things that they put on. So we actually have several, there's the Fort Adams Trust, which is created through legislation, and the famous jazz and folk festivals, George Wein just created a foundation, and they are now also entering into an agreement to ensure that the jazz and folk festivals continue to come to Newport over a period of years. And then there's actually something called the Fort Adams Foundation. That's a great example of a resource that would be very underutilized if we didn't have these partnerships. We have 2 FTEs running that facility, and at times we'll have 15,000 people there for an event.
Thank you, Director.
Anybody else? Mr. Ozovsky.
I just want to say thank you for coming in, because prior to your comments, I mean, the look of these projects is all brick, mortar, and large. And you demonstrate a totally different picture as to what the possibilities are. So thanks for giving us the ideas.
Welcome.
Just picking, Mr. Simmons? Sorry.
A quick question. Do you think right now that there's enough, I guess, identification clarity on the criteria for protection of the public interest on the wastewater and the other projects? You're assuming, again, someone's going out, it's a complexity of you have a 20-year, 30-year
Right.
life, the maintenance, the operational, the oversight. Do you think without a specific authorization and methodology to do the oversight or the selection that it's sufficient enough as we have it today?
I do, and the reason I do is just in interacting with the municipalities. First, we have state permit limits that are protective of environmental quality. So on that score, the contracts have oversight of the municipalities. And then when you talk to the municipalities, like recently, for instance, the city of Woonsocket, they feel like they're saving significant funds over what they would spend if they were trying to operate those or do those in a different way than these long-term P3s. So I think you have efficiency, cost savings, performance, and oversight that protects the public interest.
One of the concerns expressed about P3s is the large companies that can come in from, essentially helicopter in and take over these projects. As we're looking towards potentially using P3s as a project procurement and delivery model for stormwater treatment, essentially, and it's much different level of treatment than years ago, maybe when DOT, for example, put in these big holding ponds. It was more to control volume. Now, these days, the emphasis through these EPA MS4 permits is more on treating the actual effluent from those holding structures. But the projects that will involve retrofitting entire communities to provide stormwater control provide a opportunity for whatever company might be selected to manage and deliver all these projects to break it down into much smaller projects. They may come up with a standard design for a roof garden or vegetated swales or impervious pavement with additional vegetation and parking lots, but to implement that, they can let those contracts out to much smaller earth-moving companies, landscape companies, a whole host of individuals. And I think, John, this may get to one of the issues raised about trying to have a more direct and economic impact locally. I mean, that's a lot of individual companies, small companies, mom and pop companies, if you will, and also, local artisans who are able to work in those areas, all managed by a structure, perhaps. But
so one of the things that has been special about that Maryland example is that they had a rigorous RFP process, but then after they actually selected the company, they had a bunch of committees where they took a look at various aspects of the project, and one was the community benefits. So they built into it a requirement around local jobs. And as you mentioned, many of these stormwater challenges can be met with a variety with both gray and green infrastructure. And for these green infrastructure projects where you're taking out pavement, you're building swales, you're incorporating maybe into the design of a park areas that can collect and filter stormwater, you can have unskilled local labor and your local nurserymen growing the plants and local folks involved in subcontracting or as part of the deal that you're making. And if I may, I just was talking to the head of groundwork Providence, and they hire ex-cons and people who are really having trouble finding work to do this kind of public works maintenance and construction of green infrastructure projects. And that's a triple win. They make your community more beautiful, they put local people to work, and they protect the water quality. So more of that, or being a model for doing that in a stormwater context, would be terrific.
thank you so much, Director. Really appreciate your time. And again, keep up the good work. And I like those projects. Fort Adams you're right, it's a remarkable resource. Absolutely is.
Yeah, and just to emphasize the partnership part, it really has to be a collaboration. around shared goals.
Indeed.
Yes, thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
As we move on, I just wanted to announce that we've had some written submissions and testimony provided first by Margaret Hogan Sweeney on behalf of the Surety and Fidelity Association of America. That will be made part of our record and somehow, I think, posted online, or CJ, is that correct? Also, Tom Hanley, a representative of the Berger Group, he's their Director of Government Relations, provided us some information on a number of significant P3 projects they've done over the years in the transportation, and I know they've also been involved in wastewater control with the Narragansett Bay Commission for over some years. So both of those will make available on the record and to the public without reading it.
Can you just explain, Mr. Chairman, the subject matter of the surety letter?
I'm sorry, of the surety? Again, I have not read it as yes. It says building and construction is sound public policy for P3s. There's some legislative language that they're suggesting with respect to bonding, principally. And again, that's from a surety point of view. Exactly. I'm going to ask Mr. Donovan to circulate that perhaps by an email attachment and then also make it part of our record for the commission. But we'll circulate all of this around. Before we adjourn, I just wanted to allude to our plans from here. We will have a subsequent meeting, I suppose, to discuss direction. And as you know, we've heard from a number of people about the utility of kind of standing pat with what we have versus developing more comprehensive legislation. And then I suppose a third alternative is filling in some of the holes, perhaps with respect to unsolicited proposals and other issues. But we'll have that discussion, I think, in a few weeks. I won't schedule another meeting immediately, but we may also have one final session for public comment, but that is, I think, might be better folded into any recommendations that we do make so that the public can respond in the direction we intend to take.
Any input from DOA, as all these agencies have to funnel through DOA?
I think DOA I know DOA had reached out. When we reached out to DOA, they reached out to the Nursing Education Center and the Council on Post-Secondary Education, and also reached out to the Department of Transportation. So I think they've had the people who are actually, delivering the projects, if you will, rather than the people involved in the finance and more procurement aspects of it. Okay. That way we can see what the needs are there. I'll give them we'll give them an update and indicate where we are and invite them to submit anything they like or to appear if they'd like. Thank you. Just wanted to announce that as you know, we were subject to a legislative deadline, which, if I'm not mistaken, was is come and gone? No, not quite. Come and gone. Don't do that to me. Wouldn't be the first anniversary of some kind that I've missed. But in any event, there's legislation pending. I don't know, has it been acted upon yet, if you're aware?
It's been submitted, and it will go to committee probably the next week.
Okay. It would extend our reporting period to June 30, and our commission would expire on August 30 of this year, as opposed to the current dates. I'm hoping we won't need near that long, but I think it's clear we're going to need a little bit more time beyond the current dates.
To request it, or is it just by the chair?
This was requested by the chair, but if we'd like to, I'd accept a motion to support the passage of the resolution. Second? All in favor? Aye. May we show the commission is unanimously endorsing a longer life for its work. If there's nothing further, I'd accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor? Aye. All right.